talks to the level of interest that's being expressed in this area. So today's webinar is Building in a Circular Economy, Procurement for Circular Materials. And first up, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the places in which we live and work and play. We recognise the enduring relationships they have with their lands and waters, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So for those of you who might not be familiar with us, just a little bit of explanation about Planet Ark. We have been passionately working in the environmental space for over 30 years now. We are an Australian not-for-profit and a leading environmental behaviour change organisation. Our mission is to unite government, businesses, schools and individuals through positive environmental actions. And really our purpose is to protect the planet's ability to thrive by engaging all Australians. We work with, not against businesses to improve their environmental impact. And today's webinar speaks to that with our enduring relationship with Tetra Pak and helping them with their environmental outcomes. We are here to motivate and assist people to make simple changes to their attitudes and actions within the environmental space. So why are we here? Well, we're here to talk about beverage cartons and circularity. Planet Ark is focused on circular economy solutions for packaging, including recycling. Worth mentioning that we completely understand that recycling is only one small part of the circular economy, and we also focus on other areas such as product design, supply chain solutions, end of life for products, as well as looking at production and consumption. Today, we are a facilitator between carton manufacturers, councils, recyclers, and the public. This webinar follows on from 3 webinars we've previously focused on with councils that have talked about the recycling of beverage cartons, and we are extending that today to really talk about the innovative products that can be made from that recycling process. We are exploring a beverage carton circular economy solution, a product made and from recycled content into a building material made in Australia. So the webinar is going to take roughly 45 minutes. We have 2 presenters today, Tetra Pak and saveBOARD, and we will be recording the session. And a Q&A is open for you to put your questions into, but we do ask that you remain muted throughout the presentation. We will get to those questions in the Q&A at the end of the session. Any that we can't address during this session, we will make sure we address afterwards, and we will be sending out an email with the webinar recording, the slide deck, and the answers to all your questions. So just to talk about how Planet Ark engages within the circular economy with our various programs relevant to this webinar today. Firstly, we have National Recycling Week, and if you haven't been engaged within your organisations, I encourage you to do so and look at the website. National Recycling Week runs this year from the 10th to the 16th of November. And we really focus on helping Australians explore how they recycle by sharing knowledge, education, events and stories. Tetra Pak have been a sponsor in this space. I think I've been in Planet Ark for 13 years and they've certainly been engaged with us longer than that. And if you have any questions around any of our programs or today's webinar, you're more than welcome to email us on the link at the bottom of the slide. Many of you, particularly if you are from a council, will know and have used our Recycling Near You website. We have over 1.8 million users a year, and Recycling Near You is Australia's favourite recycling directory. And excitingly, we've been working for the past year on rebuilding this website to make it faster and easier to use, with an interface featuring services for both households and businesses. And this should be launched later next month. Many of you will also know the Australasian Recycling Label, or ARL. We work on this in conjunction with APCO, and this delivers on-pack information about how to dispose of packaging. And of course, you will find this information label on Tetra Pak beverage cartons. We're also excited to talk to you about a new training initiative that we have offered to business who are trying to work through their circular economy journey. And this is a training platform called Circo, Creating Business Through Circular Design Principles. If any of you are interested in working in this space, there is a QR code on the screen. We have an online course on the 6th of May. But please visit our Australian Circular Economy Hub website for more information about taking your organisation through the Circo Business Design training. So, on to our presenters for today. Many of you will know Vikas, the Sustainability Director at Tetra Pak. His focus in Australia and New Zealand is to build recycling plants for Tetra Pak and increase the rate of carton recycling. And he will be our first presenter today. Secondly, we would like to give a warm welcome to Paul. As founder and CEO of saveBOARD, Paul transforms recyclable packaging waste into high-performance building materials. With a mechanical engineering background, Paul has built a company where sustainability and profitability coexist seamlessly, and he will be talking to you about that product and its applications later in the presentation. So without further ado, I would like to get straight into this and hand over to Vikas, and he will take you through what Tetra Pak are working on in this space.
Thanks, Claire. And let me start by saying, it's a delight to work with Planet Ark. I've actually known about Planet Ark, for almost the last 25 years and had some engagement with Planet Ark for that time. And, it's awesome for us to be involved with Australia's most recognised environmental NGO. So thank you for that. I'm just going to introduce really what Paul's going to be talking about in the main, but I'll just give you a little bit broader context about what Tetra Pak's up to. We've been working for some time in this area on specifically on achieving recycling targets, not just for Australia, but also for New Zealand. And the focus of this work is in 3 areas: making sure we have a local recycler for beverage cartons, improving sorting, as most of you probably know, working with MRFs and MRF operators is pretty key to making this happen. And then finally, an increasing collection of used beverage cartons. And I'll give you a glimpse into how we're going with some of these things. Next slide, please, Claire. So what you see here is a map of what we're up to, and you see that there are 2 saveBOARD plants. One at Tetra in New Zealand, that's been operational since December 21. The other's in Warragamba in Sydney, and that's been operational since December 22. saveBOARD, of course, also have plans in the pipeline for a plant in Victoria and a plant in Queensland, and they are still on the radar, but we don't have a fixed timing for when they'll be running yet. As Tetra Pak, we're also working on other solutions. There are, small populations in Northern Territory, concentration of people in WA around the Perth region. We're trying to find adequate small-scale solutions for those. There are also 2 significant fibre repulping or fibre recovery projects underway, one in Queensland with a company called Ozwaste, and one with APR coming up in Victoria, and we're, of course, engaged with both those parties to find other solutions that'll just diversify the options for beverage carton recycling. Next slide, please. And the big one for us really at this stage is about growing saveBOARD. And without stealing Paul's thunder, there are some great iconic projects that saveBOARD is now part of. These are some photographs from an installation that's on the back lawn of the National Gallery of Victoria in Melbourne. If you're based in Melbourne or you have an opportunity to be here, I'd encourage you to visit the installation. It's just awesomely beautiful. And of course, the NGV also provides for events. So if you're interested in inviting people along and taking them to this as a sort of centerpiece, that's a nice thing to do as well. Next one, please, Claire. Over the last 12 months, our focus with saveBOARD has been on 3 key things. The first one is building standards compliance. saveBOARD already had topic-specific compliance certification for a number of things. They've been encouraged to and have secured a sort of umbrella certification with Codemark, and Paul will tell you more about that. But of course, what it achieves is just takes away the risk of people using this product in their builds, because it's building standards compliant now. Next slide, please, Claire. Alongside building standards compliance, there's environmental compliance. And again, Paul will talk through details of the different environmental compliance that saveBOARD has. The recent one that we've supported with saveBOARD is EPDs, or Environment Product Declarations. This is a sort of emerging industry standard as a way to compare products in a particular space. So this is a standard that you can put alongside plywood or plasterboard or OSB or chipboard to understand saveBOARD's performance in comparison to those products. And of course, I'm delighted to say that the EPD for saveBOARD is negative for all products. So that's, negative carbon compared to other things that are in the market. Next slide, please, Claire. saveBOARD, of course, has been getting a bunch of media attention. You saw the picture on the front was an install at KFC. Woolworths has been saveBOARD's biggest buyer for some time. And if you walk into a new build or a recently refurbished Woolworths store, you're likely to see the saveBOARD product. And of course, it's a bespoke product for them in Woolies green, as you would expect. saveBOARD also got a Guernsey on Better Homes and Gardens, which was pretty extraordinary, and The Morning Show and Planet Shapers. So, there's interest in recycled product and what's out there, and certainly the media attention's been awesome. Next slide, please, Claire. The key for us really about beverage cartons, from a beverage carton perspective, is, we take material from trees. I mean, the highest use of a tree is wood that ends up in furniture and construction. That's typically the highest value use of a tree. We use the parts of a tree that aren't suitable for construction or furniture making and turn those into paper, which turns up in our packaging. And of course, through saveBOARD, what we're doing is recycling that packaging back into a timber product or a timber replacement product for construction. So it's returning it to a high value use. And the joy of it is, that we're doing it in Australia, that it's an Australian product available for use in the Australian construction market. And just to give you a sense of why we've chased the construction market. So last year, Australia imported $600 million worth of plywood alone. And that plywood's coming from different parts of the world with, not always a certain source of origin or how it's been harvested or procured. So it's, for us, putting a one-for-one replacement into the local Australian market's been a real win. Next slide, please, Claire. I talked about working with MRFs, and again, a big part of what we've been doing is working with MRF operators. This was, again, an interesting article that got great media attention. We were on the Channel 7 News, and I think that clip's still out there if you go looking for it. That's a AI robot that sorts beverage cartons sitting inside a MRF in Victoria. That's actually APR's MRF, and you see two pictures of that. The picture on the right-hand side shows you the bin that it's dropping the beverage cartons into. So the reason why we support AI robots is because you don't need to relay the MRF. It's a really easy retrofit into a MRF at a pretty low cost. There are 3 MRFs around the country that are sorting cartons at the moment, and of course we'd love for you to introduce your MRF operators to this tech or point them at Paul or me so we can talk to them about getting robots in. And as Tetra Pak, we are financially supporting the installation of sorting equipment. So, that's available out there as well. Next slide, please, Claire. As a consequence of saveBOARD now providing a local destination for recycling beverage cartons and of MRFs coming on board to sort beverage cartons, what we're starting to see is councils reintroducing beverage cartons into their curbside collection. I've just put a couple of examples up there from the City of Yarra and Macedon Ranges Shire Council, and it's great to see that happen. And of course, that's key to providing household curbside access to recycling. Next slide, please, Claire. For us, key things that are on the radar at the moment. So Victorian government at the moment has proposed standardisation of curbside collection to include beverage cartons. And this is a really key part of increasing collection of feedstock for local recycling, and of course we're hugely supportive of that. Tetra Pak also supports extended producer responsibility, or EPR schemes, that are being considered at a federal level at the moment and being worked on by APCO, and we're hugely supportive of that. We also support the expansion of the container deposit scheme. We know that container deposit schemes provide an incentive to consumers to return. They achieve the highest return rates of any collection scheme in the country, and the material that's returned is, source separated and clean generally. So it's a great source of material for recycling. And so we support that. As a consequence of the work we've done, aseptic cartons are labelled with the check locally mark in Australia and New Zealand, and gable-top cartons can be labelled as recyclable in Australia. What we need, and perhaps a call to action for those of you who are on this call, is in this area of collection. This is where we need you to be vocal. Of course, we need you, for people who are here from councils, to work with your MRFs to introduce them to us so we can support them with sorting equipment, talk about how they can achieve better sorting for their recyclables. We also need you to be vocal with improving container deposit schemes, both in terms of access, container deposit scheme access being recognised towards labelling, but also in expanding the CDS to include all sizes and types of beverage containers, not just beverage cartons, but other beverage containers as well, because return rates for CDS are significantly higher than they are for curbside, for example, certainly much higher than voluntary schemes. So expanding CDS would be a good thing. And beverage cartons being included in curbside, because we know that this is the widest access and the most convenient way for people to recycle. And I think the last slide is just a summary of where we've landed, and I won't soak up time on that. The slide will be available in the material that Claire distributes. So, but please reach out to myself, especially if you want to understand how to approach state governments or MRF operators with what can be achieved. Thank you, and back to you, Claire.
Great, thank you so much for that, Vikas. And yes, we're very welcome to receive any comments, feedback, questions, either during or post this webinar. And we will be sharing Vikas and Paul's details as well. So without further ado, getting into the meat of the presentations, Paul, if you'd like to take the floor.
Cool. Thanks, Vikas and Claire, and yeah, welcome everyone. I'm a Kiwi, but we're a ANZ business, 50% owned by Australian shareholders and New Zealand shareholders, and plants in both. And I spend probably half my time in Australia these days. So yeah, maybe next slide, and I'll probably the easiest way is there's a video that will start playing now, which is we got interviewed by a local TV show 3 years ago now, but the story still remains the same, and it's a great way to see the process start to finish. So I'll just be quiet for 2 minutes while you watch this.
Yeah, fingers crossed this works.
Most people see waste, but we actually see a resource. So we've got a mixture of Tetra Pak type cartons, so like your Just Juice, your oat milk, right through to, the shrink wrap, labels, doesn't matter, we can take it.
Because at saveBOARD, that mix, that's the secret ingredient.
Trying to get about a 70% blend of fibre with plastics to actually make our board. When we're mixing fibre and plastic together, it's actually making that consistent brew. There's no adhesives, no glues, nothing. It's just plastic under pressure and temperature causes the particles to bond together, almost like a lasagna effect. We end up with a composite, and then we cool it off so the plastic then solidifies
into saveBOARD.
So this is our plasterboard equivalent. So it's got a paper face. It is not as perfect as plasterboard because we're putting a paper over the shredded particles. So there is a natural dimpling. This is our exposed board, which comes in 6 colours. This is pre-finished. You don't have to do anything to it. You just basically put it up. It can handle knocks. You can screw things into it. It's got a really good thermal property. There's a mixture of both commercial customers right through to residential. Every board used is actually 25 kgs of waste that would to
Even the waste isn't wasted.
we're giving our builders bags to actually, bring it back and remanufacture into new products. So it actually provides that circular loop. This is not new technology. I've just taken something that works overseas. Everything is local. We take local waste and supply a building product that isn't affected by world markets. People can actually buy something sustainable and know that they're actually making a difference.
So hopefully people heard all that. So hopefully that video answered quite a few of your questions, but there's some common properties. Like mentioned, it's actually, I guess, from the engineer in me is that it's actually high performance. It actually has got an excellent bracing. It's more like a plywood in terms of its impact resistance. It's got common question is fire. It's actually a group 3, which is the same as plywood and MDF OSB. There's no harmful dusts or vapors. We're using food grade packaging. There's no silicas. It's basically what you have your food in, we use as our product. It's a 99% recycled content. It's circular in design. We still need people to bring it back to us. And there's no VOCs, formaldehydes. And it's safe to use indoors. And yeah, we've got lots of installations, which we're keen to show you in the next slides. As Vikas mentioned, Woolworths is actually our biggest client in Australia. We've done probably 60 supermarkets so far, and we'll do around 80 this year. So we're part of their spec. Next slide. KFC, same thing. They're a lot smaller in scale because the restaurant areas, but this is the first one we did 2.5 years ago in South Penrith, and it still looks really great. Next slide. In Sydney, we did the FIFA World Cup Hyundai Museum, which was fully clad in saveBOARD, which was on Darling Harbour in Sydney. Next slide. And as Vikas showed earlier, it's getting heaps of media and architectural exposure, but it's called Home Truth by Breathe. So it's I guess an installation that is trying to show how the typical Australian size house can actually be about 1/3 the size. So it's sort of using a skeletal frame clad with saveBOARD, and it's free, and it's in, if you're in Melbourne, it's there until the end of June. Next slide. And this is actually in a council building. This is ceiling tiles. So we recently refitted, I think it was about 8,000 square meters of ceiling tiles. We took out their old plasterboard ceiling tiles and actually replaced them with saveBOARD, and they love them, and it's sort of a different effect. Next slide. If you're into fashion or know anything about fashion, Alexander McQueen, we did all the this was also at the NGV in Melbourne. We did all the flooring, the pedestals, the walls, and the cool thing at the end of the project, some of it got gifted to different organisations around Melbourne, and some of it came back to us to get remanufactured into new boards. So yeah, it was pretty cool. One of our biggest sellers is actually around hoardings and construction commercial sites. It might be instead of a temporary fence where you're trying to keep people out, or from potential protection from the construction activity on the other side, is a hoarding material. In Melbourne, we've got about 3 or 4 kilometres on the East Link Road at the moment. And yeah, it's a really nice circular economy solution for construction companies, because they can see it, they can use it, they can give it back to us rather than going in the skip bin. Next slide. And look, I guess government and councils have a role. Obviously, the new ESP policies, since July 24, anything over $7.5 million needs to have, sustainable procurement options, and rolling out in July this year is around, ICT, furniture, fittings and equipment and textiles. So I guess the good thing about our product, we specifically designed it so it's an easy replacement for traditional materials. So everything from the fixtures are the same spacing as you would use for, say, plasterboard or for other materials, so people aren't having to learn a new product. Next slide. And it's all around small steps. So this is an example of a council project. It's a New Zealand one, but it's still the same. So if we start playing that, it's still the same theory. It just takes a little bit of leadership and makes.
We're down here at the new Gordon Spratt Reserve Netball Hub, where we've created a low impact, low cost, yet fully functional and fit for purpose structure for the community. The building was manufactured off-site and placed onto piles, so it is effectively a relocatable cabin that could be repurposed if required to accommodate any future developments. With a large covered deck, complete with wheelchair ramp, the building is fully accessible via a new footpath that connects the netball hub to the rec centre. The building also includes these saveBOARD panels, a sustainable building option made from these milk cartons.
Milk and juice cartons are not accepted in our curbside recycling bins. However, here at the Tamanga transfer station, the community can drop off the cartons if they are cut open and clean. By repurposing these cartons into a building material, we're not only reducing waste to landfill, we're also reducing the emissions of the built environment and exploring a new way of making construction more sustainable.
This new facility allows us to have a home and come together as the Papamoa sporting community. A place to hang out, and it's a great viewing platform to watch the games from. A place to run our tournaments and a safe place to store our things.
So yeah, it's just a simple example where they've, taken a bit of leadership and they've made a small change, and now they're rolling it out to their other sort of community facilities where they need to refurbish or provide new facilities. The one thing that's it's easy to explain to builders, but sometimes hard to explain to the general public, is that when you compare materials, you've actually got to compare on a sort of a like for like basis. Maybe if you move, click a few more points.
Yep.
So for example, our exposed product is 3 or 4 times more expensive as a piece of plasterboard, but you actually need to include the total install cost. So for example, with our exposed product, like they mentioned, it's pre-finished, so you just put it up and that's it. Whereas obviously if you have plasterboard, you've got to get the plaster in 3 times, you've got to get the painter in 3 times. So not only is it longer, but it's also, those all things add to the total cost. So so it's not probably something we would say do your whole house in, but it's perfect for community facilities, commercial, where you're after something that's hard wearing, durable, and is cost effective. Next slide. Third-party verifications. Look, it does matter. There's lots of misinformation, or call it claims, that people make that say, you know, their material is recyclable, but there's no systems or processes in it to actually make that happen. You know, we've spent a whole lot of money and support Tetra Pak and our stakeholders to actually put a lot of these things together. Like our Declare label, we've had to literally provide all the, you know, the material breakdown of all the components to make sure there's no red list materials, which are basically things that are, you know, potentially harmful to human health, like, you know, PVCs and other type materials like silicas. As Vikas mentioned, our EPDs, it took over about 18 months, but we provide all the energy and all the inputs that go into our product, and to actually provide our environmental impact. We're going to be one of the first of about 20 companies to be on the Australian digital product passport, which will be available to most states, I think, where new buildings will, if they use our product, they'll actually be part of the passport. So in the future, that materials can be traced back and worked out whether they actually have a recyclable, what are the options. And then GECA, for those who aren't familiar, GECA is the Good Environmental Choice Australia, which basically goes through about 4 pillars of, you know, whether we are good for the, you know, sustainable, good for the planet. We have sort of ethical procurement and employment laws, right through to, you know, are our products fit for purpose? So next slide. And part of this is sort of, most of you probably heard of Scope 3 carbon emissions. So, you know, for the larger local government and large corporates, they're already in what they call Group 1, which is if you have two of the following 3, whether revenue or $1 billion assets or 500 employees, you're going to start reporting on your carbon emissions. So I guess the good thing about saveBOARD is that, you know, I guess the good thing about the emissions reporting is that it puts focus on how to reduce the emissions long term, which has to be good for both, you know, corporates and local government. And a simple thing to note is, like, if you're refurbishing a building where you're using the existing foundations and structure, you know, your wall and ceiling linings are actually in your top 10 potential carbon emitters for a project. So, for next slide, when using products like ours, which are, you know, are low energy, you know, we're using you know, we can actually be a benefit for a project to offset some of those higher carbon materials or services that are less avoidable, and all those are on our website. Next slide. And here's a really simple comparison, is that saveBOARD's pretty similar to plywood if it's untreated. Plasterboard's a positive emitter of, you know, carbon. So if you actually use, say, our exposed product, the delta is actually almost 10 kgs of carbon per square meter. So if you know, doing 1,000 square meters of retrofitting, you've potentially saved 10,000 kgs of carbon by replacing plasterboard with saveBOARD. So it can make a massive difference. Next slide. And we try and make it easy for our clients. So we actually have taken all our carbon footprint information, and rather than people having to try and work it out themselves, is we actually provide our clients a carbon footprint receipt. So this project here for Hawkins, which is part of Downers, it saved 10 tonne of carbon and about almost 13 tonne of recyclable material from landfill. So some fun facts: that's like driving 37,000 kilometres in a standard petrol vehicle, flying 10,000 kilometres in a plane, travelling for 125,000 kilometres in a train as a passenger, or planting 4,000 trees, which is what they would absorb in 1 year. So yeah, it's actually measurable. Another one is social enterprise and ethical procurement. So our products are stocked by Knoxbrook, who are a certified social enterprise. And for those who don't know much about social enterprise, they have sort of 3 primary goals, which is around social, cultural, and they're providing a benefit for the community. Generally, they're not-for-profits, and they invest in people and public with community benefits. So it's you sort of get a 2-in-1. You're supporting a social enterprise and you're doing something that's good for the planet. So my last slide is how to create change. Well, obviously it's like how to eat an elephant. It's one step at a time. So why saveBOARD? It's high performance. So you're not buying something people think recyclable. It's not as superior. We actually probably got the highest bracing performance in the industry for our product. It is cost competitive in most cases. It's but you got to try and measure everything. Planet, obviously, it's the more sales, the greater the environmental impact. Like I mentioned, social and ethical procurement, carbon reporting, and and this is not just the saveBOARD thing, but supporting circular products and services like saveBOARD, creates innovation that is required to solve these big problems and underpin investment. And we want to build another plant, like Vikas mentioned, but it's all demand driven. We need demand. We're not funded by the government. Like any business, you need to have enough demand to underpin and spend the money, basically. So if you can see through the slides that, hey, there's an opportunity to use saveBOARD in your business or local council or government agency, then just reach out. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Paul. I will stop sharing now, and so I can see some of the questions that have been coming through. Vikas, I don't know if you've been looking at and want to pinpoint any in particular at this stage.
Yeah, I'm happy just to start from the start, and I'm seeing that there are questions that at this stage are directed mostly to me or Paul, Claire. So I'll pick up the first one. It's from Esther. Esther, you're asking about whether you heard me say that Tetra Pak would offer financial support to MRFs to retrofit sorting equipment, and the answer is yes. Typically, we're offering somewhere between a third and half of the funding because we want the MRF operator to have skin in the game, and we also think that it's important that the AI robots in particular are used to not just sort beverage cartons, but potentially sort other materials that are recyclable but are typically in lower volumes in curbside collection. So, where we're doing this sort of work in other parts of the world, we're doing it in partnership with other companies or other industry associations that have an interest in other materials. So it works in 2 ways. One is that MRFs get an opportunity to have cleaner streams of materials of the high volume materials they're producing, because they can sort some of the lower volume stuff out of those streams. And of course, it improves circularity, right? You're finding if you have a clean source separated stream of a particular material like beverage cartons and a local recycler like saveBOARD, you get a great circularity outcome. So yeah, we'd be delighted to talk to any or all MRF operators about support for funding. Paul, the second one's from Sarah, and it's about testing. And I'll read the question. Curious to understand what chemical and VOC testing has been done on these products, i.e. what's the off-gassing timeline, etc.
Good question. So we have our test results on our website. We've used CTEC, which are one of the main testing labs in Australia. I think they did a 7-day. I guess fundamentally, we're using food packaging. They naturally don't have VOCs or formaldehydes, otherwise people would not be buying them. So we're using, food grade packaging. In terms of all the chemical, we've employed Brisbane-based a hygienist who's done actually testing of dust particles on person during the process for over a week at a time to make sure that our staff are not exposed to anything. And the good news is the results came back really good, and we don't actually take any additional precautions that you would normally use outside of a normal manufacturing plant because there's nothing nasty in the feedstock. Hopefully that answers it.
I'll pick up the next one, Catherine. Similar question from you about who bears the financial cost. I can tell you that the last robot we funded locally was about 350,000 Australian dollars, and Tetra Pak paid a third of that cost. And of course, that's open to negotiation depending on who else will come to the party. Big part of the reason why we're supporting robots is because they're a really easy retrofit. You don't have to relay MRFs. You don't have to have new conveyors. They're a much simpler proposition to drop into a MRF. So that's why we're working with those. Of course, we'll work with other equipment if MRFs prefer other equipment. Jane, your question's about the pathway for cartons coming back through council curbside. So yes, council curbside is the big pathway or the potential pathway when MRFs are sorting. The other big pathway at the moment in Australia is container deposit. In fact, in terms of Paul's feedstock, the biggest source of it at the moment is the container deposit schemes around the country. I should, just for clarification, say in New Zealand, there are drop-offs operating around the country, and you saw an example of that in the video Paul showed. I understand City of Sydney has already included beverage cartons in one of their pop-up collection sites, but I'm not sure about that. So if someone from City of Sydney is here, perhaps they could answer that. That's potentially a pathway, but what we see is that voluntary collections typically return a very small percentage of material. So yeah, council curbside collection and CDS are the big sources. Alison, your question, perhaps this one's for Paul. What does the processing chain look like for the liquid paperboard material finding its way to saveBOARD? And is saveBOARD's feedstock only from municipal MRFs and CDS collections? Actually, sorry, I thought it was a question about processing, but it's about collection. And I think, yeah, as I just said, it's through municipal MRFs and the CDS collectors. I'd like to understand how MRF collected material way to where the demand for saveBOARD products provide a sustainable solution for material in the long term. So there's two options generally around the world for where this material goes. One is for it to go back into the paper stream, so for it to be recycled into paper or cardboard. The other is for it to go into construction materials. Australia is an interesting country because we import so much product from overseas that comes in paper or paper-based packaging, corrugated cardboard boxes, that we end up with twice as much recovered paper and cardboard in Australia compared to what the local recyclers like Visy or Opal typically will use. So there's 100% oversupply of fibre in our market. And so the reason why we've chosen to work with saveBOARD and on construction materials is because we're a huge importer of construction materials, construction panels, and saveBOARD provides a one-for-one timber replacement material for those, typically plywood, OSB, chipboard, and the like. So that's we think that this is actually a more viable, a better viable, a more sustainable solution for Australia to return this material to a high value use in construction.
Vikas, we're at time at 12:45. I mean, if you'd like to sort of maybe select one more question to answer, but as I mentioned before, if you have any more questions, please put them in the Q&A. We will take all those questions and respond to people and the wider group with the answer to them all. So no problem with that.
And maybe it's just a clarification of Alison's question, in terms of processing specifically. Paul, I'll hand this one to you, but I often talk about it as being a shredder, a blender, and a toasty maker.
Yeah, and look, that video I showed is also on our YouTube channel. If you want to, got about 80 videos of differing varying quality of things, silly things we've done. But yeah, ultimately we've got to shred it up. We've got to mix it together, and it's getting that right blend of cartons and soft plastics to make our composite. And we just use literally heat and pressure. You could make the saveBOARD in your home toasty pie machine at home. Obviously, it doesn't have the scale to do it, but you could actually do it if you put two pieces of silicon together. And yeah, the IP and the smarts is around what those ratios are, what the pressures and temperatures need to be to make it efficiently.
Thanks, Paul. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to all for taking the time to attend today. A big thank you to Vikas for your beautiful explanations and Paul to talk us through the product. Please feel free to email any of us directly. We will be sending out an email as soon as we can after this call to address all the questions with the recording and the slide deck. And we hope to be able to keep this conversation going in the future to really help us all with such an important journey for us all to really achieve the circular economy outcomes that this country needs, and to really help support the supply and the end product and the demand for products such as saveBOARD. Recycling only really works if there's a place of high value for those products to go to, and a demand with your procurement policies to take them up and make use of them. Any final comments from you, Vikas or Paul?
Just a big thank you, Claire, to you for organising, and Paul, it's always great to hear you talk about your products, and just your engagement with what you're doing is awesome. So thank you for that.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Awesome. Thank you.